Birds 365, Tuesday Gathering. Jody Mack with John McMullen, your Mac and Mac guys. We're getting dangerously close to the NFL draft. Now only single digits away, 9 days away before all teams get together. And it's better than virtually last year. They're getting together in Chicago to actually hold an NFL
Cleveland,
draft.
Jody.
What'd I say, Chicago?
Yeah.
My bad. Cleveland for this year's NFL draft. We'll talk to a guy next who actually did it for a living. He was part of war rooms and draft boards, which all fans would love to be able to say they were actually up close and personal with. Our next guest did just that. He did it for the Tennessee Titans. Former director of college scouting, Blake Beddingfield, joins us here on Birds 365. Blake, Jody Mack, and John McMullen here. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thrilled to have you, Blake, especially this time of year as teams put their finishing touches on draft preparation. I don't think a lot of fans understand, so you can kind of take us inside. I want to start first with the board. I mean, you pick up these draft publications all over. You'll have 400, 500 players profiled. NFL teams, man, they get it down, focused. I heard Nick Cesario a couple years ago. The lowest number I ever heard when he was with the Patriots was 75. What is a typical NFL draft board? How deep does it go? How many players end up on that for a team?
You know, it's amazing when you start the process, you start with about 1,300 names, and that number dwindles significantly as you get to the draft in April. That number is going to get to 75 to 125 roughly. This is after all the medicals, all the background is done. This is something that it takes a lot of a long process to get to, but those numbers dwindle. And when you get to draft day, your draft board is really roughly, I'd say, about an average of 100 names on it for those 7 picks that you have. And usually when the draft is over, you still have 15 to 20 names still on that board.
And the calls start to go out to those players for free agency, undrafted free agent type guys. All right, before we get there, I just set the calendar for you. We're 9 days out. If you were still with the Titans or any other football team, how much fluidity is in the board? Is the board done in stages? Is it done in erasable ink? How do you adjust the board? How much movement is going on 9 days out as compared to 4 days out, as compared to 48 hours out? How does the changing of the board, if any, go leading up to an NFL draft?
You know, right now, the people outside of the football personnel, outside of the coaches, outside of the scouts, are really starting to make their mark on the board. And what I mean by that is in a couple of days, they're going to sit down with all their doctors, their surgeons, the trainers, and they're going to go over every single player that has issues. And those players may get moved off the board. Now, there may be a situation, depending on the general manager and his philosophy, where they end up sliding a player down. Maybe the risk or the value of that injury of the player is better in the latter rounds. And that happens at times. Sometimes a player is completely taken off the board. So people outside the normal personnel are now having their influence on these players. Outside of the trainers and orthopedic surgeons and doctors, you're going to have maybe your psychologist, if you have a team psychologist, which we have. You're going to sit down and go over all the players that they interviewed throughout the process. You're going to have the FBI, the local state police reports on some of these players, and that could start to change. Now, getting back to the football side of things, the changes on the board are going to be very minimal. You have a vertical board and you have a horizontal board. What you're looking at, and vertically within the positions, you may have some slight movement, one player over another based on scheme fit, based on maybe a position coach likes this player without any kind of pushback from the area scouts that have already evaluated them. So you're going to sit down as a group, as coaches by themselves, scouts by themselves, and then group together with the coaches and scouts and start to go over those different tier groups that you may have within the certain position groups.
Blake, talk about the process as we get, we're this close. We're 9 days out. This is sort of the time where people, I guess, lay the foundation about moving up or moving back. You make calls and see who's interested. How much of that is, previous work, previous history versus fly by the seat of your pants on draft night if you want to move up and grab a player or move down for that matter?
Usually that work is done prior to the draft and usually a few days out. And I would always be in charge of a number of teams, whether it's 4 or 5 different teams that I called upon myself. Maybe the pro director also had 4 or 5 teams, a director of player personnel, and then the general manager. But depending on your relationship with certain general managers with the opposing clubs, and that work is done a week out. And you're starting to kind of like you said, lay the groundwork of a potential trade, whether it's move up or move back if their player's not sitting there. Some of those conversations are done at pro days where the general managers get together and have a conversation and start to lay that groundwork there. There's so much interaction between the different personnel groups with the teams that it's easy to formulate those type of trade scenarios, especially just through talk, whether it's at a pro day or on the phone moving toward the draft. So a lot of that's done. Who to pick up the phone and call if you're looking to trade out, and those things are made pretty easily.
Blake, let me ask you about how a board is put together, and we'll use the Eagles as an example since this is Birds 365. The Eagles have evaluations, their own evaluations of the players they have on their roster right now. This is supposed to be a historically good NFL quarterback draft, specifically at the top 5 guys. Do the Eagles rate the quarterbacks, even though they believe that most of them, if not all 5 of them, will be gone before they pick at number 12? They have a young man that they seem to be pretty confident in, want to give a shot, aren't looking to bring in competition for him. How do you use the quarterback position when putting your board together if you're not really thinking about taking a quarterback? Can you just remove where your team is at roster-wise when ordering the players, putting them in an order? Or do you have to, maybe even subconsciously, does that go through your mind as you're putting together the order of your board?
I think that's a great question, and I think that's the answer should be you evaluate all players the same. You evaluate whether you have a position strength on your roster right now, you should still evaluate the players the same. Once you start to tinker with those type things, that's really when you mess up the board. I've seen that happen, and what you need to do is just stay strong to your beliefs, meaning in the Eagles situation, they have a quarterback, they have a second-year player moving forward that they like and feel that he's the guy. But if they value a quarterback, whether it's a Justin Fields or a Trey Lance over a Jalen Hurts, they need to stay true to their board because maybe those other positions have come off and they're the best player available at that position. You can never go wrong with 2 solid quarterbacks if you have a player that is valued over the one you currently have. If he's not, then you need to go to the next position where the best player available could be. But I think staying true to your board really allows you to make the best picks possible. And that's round 1 through 7. I really think that best player available is really a strong way to pick in the draft. And if you stay true to that, you possibly could get a starter late in the latter rounds.
Thrilled to have him, Blake Beddingfield, former director of college scouting for the Tennessee Titans. If you're in Nashville, you can listen to him on occasion, 104.5, The Game in Nashville. By the way, awesome city, Blake. So everyone should visit. But I wanted to talk to you about value because obviously, teams value certain positions more than others. It starts with quarterback. It could be edge rusher. It could be offensive line. How does that, when you look at the value of the position versus just the pure traits and the pure talent of a particular prospect, how can that affect him? If it's a lesser valued position, how far could he fall?
I think, John, I like that question as well. And the reason I say that, there's 3 premium positions in the NFL: quarterback, left tackle, and pass rusher. You need those players. Very rarely do they come available in free agency. So not only are you looking to the draft and the value that the draft would have, but it's going to be hard to get those players in free agency next year if that's what you're looking for. So you have to value those positions a little bit higher than some of the others. Maybe you can get a receiver or a running back or a safety later in the draft, a depth piece on the defensive line. But if you can find a pass rusher, a 3-down player, if you can find a left tackle that can be your left tackle for a number of years, and especially the quarterback position, those are paramount when you're starting to rank players in the draft. The ability to play those positions and play them at a high level really increases their value, so to speak. So, those other positions get pushed down a little bit when you're talking about those three major.
I think you already answered this question, but I guess I'm going to tie you down to the answer about when you come up on the board, your position in the draft, according to your draft board. The Eagles are at number 12 here. Let's say when their pick comes up, their top 7 guys that they have rated are all off the board. Their 8th guy is a quarterback, but they're kind of in a position to say, Jalen Hurts is going to be our guy. Then the 9th guy's off the board, the 10th guy's off the board. Then there's a wide receiver, which they may look at it as a position of need. Then there's a left tackle, which they may look at as a position of need. Then there's a cornerback. So you've got a couple of people rated above. What is your number one need? How many places on the board would you be willing to use? If you really like a kid and you're actually surprised that he's still there, will you, quote unquote, reach to fill a need? First round, second round, third round? Does it change over the course of the rounds? What's the acceptable number of guys that you would skip over rather than just going hard and fast, next guy on the board, that's the guy we're taking?
I think it depends on the position. It depends on the strength of the position. If you're talking about receivers this year, there's a really good top tier 3 players that are up ranked a little bit above the others. If those 3 happen to get drafted, now you're looking into that group where there's a larger number of that group. You can bypass that position and now look into the second round if you're talking about receivers. And I'm talking about this draft in particular, but it's very hard to start passing over high valued players on your board. The work is done over a year-long process, and to change that rule on draft day really is when mistakes are created. So if a position, whether it's a quarterback or maybe a left tackle or what have you, is still there and that player is valued above maybe a need position, you have to take it, because at some point that pick, if you reach and take a player that's a lesser talented player than the value of that pick at number 12, it's going to come back and bite you at some point. May come back and bite you in that 5th year when you decline that 5th year option because the player didn't play up to the value of that number going into the 5th year. So now, instead of getting a first round pick for 5 years and that extra year that the NFL gives you, you're going to get him for 4 because he doesn't value that pick. So you have to think that far ahead. And I think that's when the picks are the most sound.
All right, Blake, I want to take you into draft night. You're up. You're on the board. Other than trading up or trading down and having those discussions with potentially other teams, trading down in that type of instance, should there be any debate at that point on the player on the board if you do have to take the pick? If you're ready and you're going, should there be debate in the war room when that card is ready to be handed in, or that's got to be done, when the draft board is set?
If the process is done correctly, then no, there's no debate. If the process is vetted out enough during the weeks leading up to the draft, through the coaching staff, through the scouting staff, general manager, obviously, and possibly an owner. I've been in situations where the owner had a say. That has to be done ahead of time. And if you're doing that, if you're making that decision within that 10-minute on the clock or 5 minutes on the clock, you have potential to make mistakes. Right now, that decision should be made and that pick should be easy. Really, draft day, outside of trade scenarios, like you mentioned, trading back or up, is really a simple process. You're hoping that players there are still there on the board when you're picking, but really you're selecting players off that board that you've already vetted for an entire year. And if the conversations are had and the work is done, it should be an easy process.
All right, let me keep it in a conversational mode. Leading up to the draft, like where we are right now, 9 days away, everyone's feeling everyone else out. You're doing your own internal work and debating and setting the board and getting to a point where you're not having debates / arguments / selling points on draft night, but you're taking in information from outside your room. How many people are actually making those calls? Is it only the general manager? Is it the head of scouting? Is it individual scouts who may have relationships with other scouts on other teams who may know the thinking of those teams who are in those prep meetings? Conversations could be everywhere. how many actually have substance that could end up with a team moving up or moving back? Is it GM only, or is it a wider net than that?
It depends on the general manager at the time. If he allows you to go out and kind of research and do some work outside the building, then that's a possibility. In my situation, I've always been allowed to go out and find information. I think information leading up to the draft is so important, whether it's you on the phone with players, digging up, because there are a lot of loose lips in the NFL. And if you can call on some players and whether it's scouts or personnel directors that start to tell a player they're really interested, I'm going to listen. I talk to a lot of agents at this time. Now, agents are selling their player, trying to get their player drafted higher, but I'm also going to listen to some that I've known in the business for a long period of time. I'm also going to call some college coaches, especially on the higher valued players, see who's called them recently about some of the players. I'll say this, we've selected some players with the Titans where I've been on the phone with a player, texting or calling and finding out some information of who's been on the phone with them recently. And we've selected some players over some other teams because of some of that information. So it's very important to kind of continue to do your background work, continue to do some kind of reconnaissance, so to speak, just to maybe help your team out with a draft choice here and there.
Blake, I want to talk to you about the 2021 process as a whole. Obviously, you're not in the weeds anymore like you once were, but it's different. I mean, even if you go back to last year when the pandemic hit, it was late in the draft process. So you had the combine, you had some of that typical stuff. This time, no combine. I always joke, I've never seen so many 4.3s in my life. Everybody's a track star in a pro days. I'm not sure how much you can trust those numbers. I'm sure you trust certain people and delve into information that way. We finally had the medical evaluations in Indianapolis. From people you talk and know in this league, how much more difficult has this process been for them?
Very difficult. I think the teams that have veteran scouting staffs have eased through this transition a little bit easier because veteran scouts have a network of people they can call on to find out background information. If you're a young scout in this business and you were thrown on the road 2 years ago, good luck finding information out. College coaches are very guarded with the information that they give out. Now to a new scout without any past relationship and trust built up, for that scout to call on a coach, you're going to get very minimal information. I need that network of people, whether it's a coach, a staff member, a trainer, a strength and conditioning coach, maybe a secretary that's been there 30 years. I need to be able to call on those people. And that's very important for scouts to have. So these veteran scouting staffs, veteran scouts in this business really have, they're a little ahead of the game than some of the younger guys that are really searching to find that network of information. And information right now is key, especially in this environment. When you have these opt-out players that haven't been on campus for over 12 months, we're talking about some high-profile players, whether it's Jamar Chase or Sewell. These guys have not been on campus in a year. Where have they been? How are you going to find out? Can you dig back to high school, their academic counselors? Who's seen them over the past year? That's a lot of work that needs to be done. That's really outside of evaluating just a football player.
All right, Blake, I'm going to ask you to put your scouting Rolodex aside and get your scouting eye out instead. We just mentioned that it's a good chance the Eagles aren't going to be picking a quarterback this year at number 12. They do seem committed, at least for a good, solid year, to Jalen Hurts. We'll see about the future thereafter. But I'm very intrigued by this quarterback class. I'm on record as saying it is as good a quarterback class as we've had 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, maybe even 20. Maybe you got to go all the way back to 1983 to have a comparable quarterback class. I am that high on it, have been all year. How good is the class? How would you rank the 5 guys who we all believe are coming off the board in the first round?
I'm going to say the class is very good because of the person that heads up the class. I think Trevor Lawrence is the best quarterback prospects as Andrew Luck. He has all the intangible qualities outside of the athletic traits. This is a guy that I think was 52-2 in his high school career, and I believe he lost 3 games at Clemson. This is a winner. He has a track record of success, high-level athleticism, competitor, winner. And that's what's going to help him going forward, especially to a team like Jacksonville that has some pieces in place on offense, but he has that franchise ability. Franchise quarterbacks can carry a team with minimal players around. I think the rest of the group is a solid group. You look at Zach Wilson, a lot of arm talent, a lot of ability, a lot of upside, not a finished product by any means, but he shows the necessary traits that really shows that he can be a very good quarterback in the league. If you go to the next one, Justin Fields, outstanding athlete, physical traits, has had a lot of success in winning at Ohio State, has some technical things, some fundamental things with his throwing motion that need to be cleaned up, but a high-level athlete should be able to make that transition. If you look at Mac Jones, probably the total opposite of Justin Fields, the very accurate, smart, poised quarterback in the pocket that needs good players around him to have success, but has had that at Alabama and showed a high level of play because of that. If you go to the next player, Trey Lance, a player that has sat out almost an entire year, very minimal starting opportunities, but has a lot of the physical traits that you're looking for in a starting quarterback, doesn't need to be pushed into a starting job in year one, needs to sit and be able to be groomed by a player. When I say that, and those are things that I used to say in the scouting room, in a draft room, a player needs to be developed. Do you have that coach on staff that can develop? Not every coach is a developer. Some are X's and O's, some are good coaches, but they don't develop. So when you say that in your report as a scout, those questions need to be answered on the other side. Every coach thinks they're a developer, but they're not. And those are very important pieces to the puzzle if you're going to take a player like Trey Lance and have him have success. I like Kyle Trask as well. I think Kyle Trask is a player that can start in this league for some teams, and he showed at Florida how he progressed over the last few years, beat out some other quarterbacks, and had a high level of success at times. He just needs to show some more consistency. I like this draft class of quarterbacks. I think to be able to get a potential 6 quarterbacks that are starting level quarterbacks in the NFL, and the NFL needs that push this year. With some of the aging quarterbacks in the league, you saw the Breeze retire, Rivers retire. The league needs starting level quarterbacks.
Boy, I love that you said that, Blake, because I think so many fans think you hand in the card or in draft night and the work is done. And you either get a good player or a bad player. I think the situation, the development of a player, the coaching staff means so much to a prospect where he lands. So I think that's a very astute point you made. But I also want to piggyback up Jody's question about the quarterback position. So you were the director of college scouting for 20 years, essentially with the Titans. The evolution of this game over that time frame, the quarterback position, how it's changed so much. People look for off-schedule offense. How much has the evaluation of the quarterback position changed over your years in this industry?
Oh, tremendous. I mean, it's amazing what the college game has done first to really force the NFL to make changes as well. And that's positionally, but quarterback especially. When I first came into the league, the Peyton Mannings were what you were looking for, the pocket passer, the smart quarterback that really wasn't going to move outside the pocket very much. He's just going to make throws from the pocket. Now today, I mean, you look at some of the first picks in the draft, Baker Mayfield right at 6 foot, Kyler Murray under 5'11", 5'10". These are smaller quarterbacks. The Drew Breeses of the world, when they came out, were considered very small, but you saw the special part of his play, but he still wasn't taken extremely high because of the lack of size. But I think he just finished a 18-year career. So the evolution of the quarterback has changed tremendously. You're going to more the athlete. And what that does, it takes pressure off the quarterback to have to make all the throws from the pocket. If you're not and I say Peyton Mannings of the world, those things, those athletic traits can still give you a high level of success, being able to move and avoid in the pocket, especially pass rushes today with the outstanding athletes that we're seeing on the edge of most NFL defenses. So it's changed the game a little bit, and I think it's made it more athletic and allowed more people to play the quarterback position, especially some really good athletes.
Blake, appreciate your quarterback take and doing the rankings for the top 5. I'm going to take you quickly to 2 more positions, 2 that I think are key because I think it could be the decision the Eagles are looking at. First things first, wide receiver. we know, at least most people seem to believe, it's a top 3 wide receiver class. Then there's a bit of a drop off. Smith, Chase, and Waddle. How would you rank the 3? Is there a big difference between 1 and 2, or then 2 and 3, or do you think they're close? And the 2 cornerbacks. Chances are one will be off the board when Eagles pick, so it might not be a choice. But if both are there, what do you think the difference is between Surtain and the Mississippi kid? How big a drop off do you think it is between 1 and 2, or is it a toss up between the 2 top cornerbacks? Give me your read and rating. 3 wide receivers, 2 top QBs.
When I look at the receivers, the one thing that I struggle with Jamar Chase is that he sat out an entire year. While Devontae Smith's game improved. This is a guy that went from a very solid player as a freshman, won the national championship game on a big play. His game progressed every year to a point to where this last year he was unstoppable. I don't care what game you put him in, he was unbelievable. Jalen Waddle is a special playmaker, okay? A special playmaker with the ball in his hands. What is his injury situation? What's the medical look like on that leg? He didn't look good in the national championship game late in the year when they gave him an opportunity to catch a couple of passes. He has to have those legs to be that special player. We're talking about Tyreek Hill type special with the ball in his hands. Jamar Chase has that physical ability and dominance out of that 2019 season. I would rank them Devontae Smith, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle in that group. I worry about Jalen Waddle's injury. If he is healthy and he's 100% to go, you really can't go wrong with either group. Now, the thing is with Jamar Chase, where's he been for the last year? What has he been doing? He looked great at the pro day, so we know he's in shape right now. But what has he been doing? I think that's real important. I know what Devontae Smith's been doing. He won the Heisman Trophy and a national championship. So I think that group, that 3, you really can't go wrong there. If you know the background on Chase and you know the health on Waddle. The corner position, Patrick Surtain and Horn from South Carolina, you're talking about 2 really high-level athletes. Patrick Surtain is a technical, fundamental corner. He's got great size, speed, length. He can cover man. He can play in zone. He's got good ball skills. He's an outstanding tackler in open space. This is a guy that prides himself on being able to make tackles on the edge and in space. That's a really good quality. J.C. Horn is a player that has a lot of upside to him. Patrick Surtain's ceiling, he's already maybe there. I mean, he may have a little bit left in him, but he is a well-developed player. J.C. Horn has a big upside because of the athleticism and length and speed that he plays with. Not near as sound technically or fundamentally as Surtain walking into the facility day one, but has a big upside. I like Surtain. I like Horn. I don't think you can go wrong with either. I think Surtain is a plug-and-play player, very similar to what the Ravens took with Marlon Humphrey. You're talking about a player that can play inside out, probably better on the outside, but he's going to be a day one starter. Horn's going to be a day one starter just because he's going to be the best athlete in the room.
Tremendous intel from Blake Beddingfield, the former director of college scouting for the Tennessee Titans. Last one for me, Blake, but I want everyone to check out Blake at beddingfieldsports.com, writes for Paul Kuharski.com, is a great reporter that's covered the Titans for a very long time. 104.5 The Zone in Nashville as well. Blake, you mentioned Devontae Smith, Jamar Chase. You know what Devontae Smith has been doing. Interesting part of this information gathering process. A lot of these guys who opted out, there's this new cottage industry, whether it's Chuck Smith working with pass rushers or Quincy Avery working with quarterbacks. You have these personal tutors. In some ways, can that be better as preparation for the next level, the NFL, versus, just playing a regular college schedule where you're prepping for college teams? Or is that information just too hard to sort of factor in?
Maybe it's just me being a scout for 20 years and I love the old way of doing things. I like to watch football games. I like to see how they compete. I can see athletes, John, and see them move and look good. And I see a player that goes to some of these facilities. They have nutritionists. They gain weight. They look better. What are they really when they're outside of that facility? I like to see when they're in their college environment, meaning they're going to classes. They have other parts of their life that they're doing. What do they look like then? When they're at these facilities, They have everything. They have trainers, they have massage therapists, they have nutritionists. Like I said, they're working out on specific drills. I think it can be good to develop a game, but you have to ask the question, who's developing them? Who is that person that's that expert that's teaching them? Are they teaching them what the coaches on the NFL level are teaching them now? Even the coaches on the high-level Power 5 program in college can teach them. Are they doing their own thing that they learned 15, 20 years ago when they played? That's okay, but you have to be able to answer those questions. I always think scouting is a series of questions you ask yourself, and there's a lot of questions to be answered when you're talking about an opt-out player. We're going to see if those players tend to drop in this draft. I think teams are going to be a little hesitant on some, especially if you have some background issues. If you have some previous background issues, you're probably going to drop in the draft further than what your value of your talent is. And I think that's when you're not around that college environment with the people that can help you. I think it's only going to really lend itself to more uneasy situations for general managers when they select those type players.
Blake, you've been doing this for a long time. So you know one of the changes of the NFL draft is the setup. It used to be, I got there early on Saturday mornings, many a year, in the Felt Forum at Madison Square Garden when we did day one on Saturday, day two on Sunday, done. Now it's a 3-day affair with only one round, first round, on that first night, starting at 8 p.m. So the timing of the draft has changed. This may be the most important question we can ask. What's the food situation like? How much eating goes on before the draft? What time are you allowed to eat? Is food allowed into the draft room? You guys have to get some sustenance because you got a lot of work to do. But how does the now in 2021 food intake break down on draft night?
The food intake is fantastic, and I never wanted to eat. My suit was always a little tight anyway, and if I ate it, it was only going to get worse. But there was a lady by the name of Penny that always, she was just a fan of the Titans, a great fan, and she would make a pizza roll for myself, and it was phenomenal. And I always ate her pizza roll. Now, we had a catering company that was fantastic, but they usually serve very heavy food. It's great. Ribs and barbecue and that type of thing, but I was stuffed and couldn't even sit down in my chair for the whole first round. So I had to learn to kind of moderate what I was eating. But the food situation, there's a lot of it, and you can have your pick. But Miss Penny was somebody that I relied upon on draft day.
Hope you have a good meal coming up 9 days from now when the NFL draft kicks off. We appreciate your being part of our draft coverage leading up to the 2021 draft. Thank you much for hopping on board. We will touch base again down the road.
I love talking football. I love talking draft. This is a great time of year. Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
Blake Beddingfield, former head of college scouting for the Tennessee Titans, here with us on Birds 365. All right, quick timeout. Come back. Johnny Mac and I will put a bow on the show. You're listening to Birds 365 here on the JAKIB Media Network.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Jody Mack, the legendary sports talker, joins forces with NFL insider John McMullen. Start your morning with Johnny Mack and Jody Mack across the JAKIB Media Network.